Hi, this is Linkhart, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make miniature daffodils from paper and wire. Nothing says springtime like a bunch of brightly coloured daffodils, and I just knew I needed to make some in miniature for my dolls. There's a huge range of different varieties and cultivars out there, so use references if you want a particular kind. I rather like the ones with white petals over the more traditional yellow ones, but they all have the same basic structure. On that note, let's take a look at the basic anatomy of the daffodil so we know what we're actually making. Here we have the stem. It's round, but has a kind of pointed seam on two sides. It's hard to describe. It feels vaguely flat, wider at the ground and tapering up to the top. Going up the neck of the stem, we come to the ovary where the seeds develop. This gets larger as the flower dies back, presenting as a rounded lump at the back of the flower. Covering that is a crinkly papery covering called the spathe. This protects the bud while the flower is developing and is pushed back when the petals unfurl. The main part of the flower is the corona, or trumpet. This can have a lot of variation between different types, some much shorter and rounder, but the basic form is of a big yellow tube with frilly edges. Inside the trumpet is the stamen, where the pollen is produced. I've simplified this part in miniature, but if you'd like to go wild and add each individual anther, knock yourself out. Finally, on the outside we have 6 petals arranged in 2 sets of 3. Right, now that you know what a daffodil should look like, let's get started. To begin with, you will need wood glue or tacky glue. I prefer the wood glue myself as it dries very fast. You also need Mod Podge or watered down PVA glue and some green acrylic paint. Green alcohol markers are optional and you can use paint if you prefer, but they're ideal for subtle shading on the petals. Paper covered florist's wire will be used for the stems, ideally in green, but you'll be painting them anyway so it doesn't really matter. Cocktail sticks and paintbrushes for applying glue, scissors for cutting, and micropore or masking tape for sticking to things. Most importantly, you will also need crepe paper in yellow and white or cream. You can use other kinds of paper too, but the texture is best with crepe, I've found. Finally, tissue paper. Brown if you can get it, if not you can recolour it with markers. Step 1. The stamen. Cut up your florist wire to a little longer than you want your finished flower to be. You can always trim them shorter, but you can't make them longer. Next, cut some white tissue or crepe paper into thin strips. Apply some glue to one end of the wire and carefully roll the paper onto it, twisting as you go to create a tapered point. This will be the stamen. Once that's dry, colour the tip in yellow with an alcohol-based marker or paint. I like to add a transition to green for realism, but you more than likely won't notice it in the final piece. Step 2. The trumpet. Take your yellow crepe paper and gently stretch it out so most of the folds are gone and it lies flat. Cut it into strips a bit wider than you want your trumpets to be. I find folding it a few times before you cut is more efficient as everything ends up the same size. Wrap the strip around a paintbrush handle and apply a thin layer of glue as you roll it up into a tube. Try not to get any glue on the handle itself, and once dry, which shouldn't take very long with tacky glue, remove from the paintbrush and trim to size. Add a little glue to the inside of one end of the trumpet and carefully press it around the stem, making sure the stamen end doesn't touch the sides. The best way to do this is by pinching the paper against the stem and turning it as you go. Doesn't matter if it looks a little rough at the stem end, as that'll be covered up later. Use a cocktail stick to reshape any wonky bits. Next, blob on some more wood glue and gently brush it along the trumpet into the stem, creating a smooth join between the two, and allow it to dry. For the frilly edge at the front of the trumpet, carefully snip into it with scissors. I'm using embroidery scissors as the perfect size for this kind of thing. Don't even bother trying with big kitchen scissors because you're not going to get anywhere. If you want to be fancy and have a more pointy effect, cut out little triangles instead of straight lines, but it's exceedingly fiddly, so don't say I didn't warn you. Once you've snipped all the way around, gently push the edges back and ta-da! Frilly bits! I'm sure they have an actual technical term for that bit, but frilly bits. Before we move on to the petals, gently bend the wire behind the trumpet for that distinctive daffodil shape. Make sure the glue is dried well at this point so you don't smoosh anything as you bend. Step 3. Petals. Take your flattened yellow crepe paper and fold it up a few times. Now when you cut out your petals, they'll all be identical. I made quite a lot of daffodils during this project and ended up doing multiple petal shapes, some more rounded, some more pointy. It all depends on what variety you're trying to emulate, but as a rule, make them wider. You can always trim them down later to a better shape. To add the first petal, smear a little wood glue onto the part where the trumpet meets the stem and gently place the petal on top. Then, using a cocktail stick in a rolling motion, press it into the surface with a little more glue. Repeat for the other 2 petals in the first layer, allowing each a minute or 2 for the glue to begin to set so you don't mess up all your hard work. It's important to remember the layout of the petals. They're arranged like 2 triangles. The first layer points up, the second points down. Generally speaking anyway. Once you've got 3 petals on, let the glue dry for a bit before adding the last 3. This is when making a lot of flowers at once comes in handy. By the time you finish the last one, the first one's ready for the next step. The technique for the last petals is the same as the first, only this time you position the petals in the gaps between the first ones. It's easy to go off track, but the glue is still malleable enough to move them around if the positioning is wrong. Before leaving everything to dry thoroughly, blob on some more glue to the back of the flower to create the ovary. It isn't too obvious in flowers in full bloom, but it adds a lot of realism to the finished piece, and it's a good way to blend the join between paper and wire. Gently smooth out the glue and leave everything for a couple of hours or overnight to dry. Step 4. Sealing. Once everything's nice and dry and no petals are in danger of coming off, it's time to add a layer of Mod Podge. This not only protects the fragile paper and makes it a little bit stronger, but also gives it some flexibility. There's no real technique here, just gently brush on some Mod Podge or thin down PVA glue, making sure you cover both sides of the petals. They will probably try to stick together as you go along, so make sure you separate them once you've finished. Allow them to dry for a couple of minutes, and then very carefully pinch the tips of the petals to form a point. I should have left this one a little bit longer as the glue is still a bit too wet rather than tacky, but it still works. Leave everything to dry and the flowers themselves are done. Step 5. Stem. Next, it's time to make those weirdly wonky stems the daffs have. For this, I use micropore tape from the first aid supplies, although ordinary masking tape works perfectly too. I just like how thin this stuff is. Take a piece of tape and place it upon one side of the wire stem, then repeat on the other side, pressing down firmly on the tape so it fully encapsulates the wire. Next, get the scissors out and trim the tape close to the edge of the wire so the tape is wider at the bottom and almost flush with the wire at the top. Well, hey! That looks a bit more stem-like, doesn't it? Next, mix up some green acrylic paint with a little wood glue to create this wonderfully gloopy mixture. The glue gives it a nice finish and a bit of flexibility as well as thickening it. Use the gloop to coat the entire stem top to bottom, leaving a little space at the ovary to blend it into a lighter shade of green. Allow that to dry and then go in with your alcohol marker for the final bit of shading on the base of the petals. Full disclaimer, this is best done before you add the layer of Mod Podge to sealing the petals, but I forgot when I was filming this, so don't do what I do. Step 6. Spathe. The final part is to add the spathe. It's just a little detail, but I find it adds so much realism you can't not really put it on. You'll need some brown tissue paper. If you don't have any, that's alright, just colour in plain old white tissue paper with a marker. The pen strokes add some nice textural details to it, I think. Using markers instead of paint is ideal because it retains some of the paper's transparency, which looks really realistic. Repeat the steps from earlier with the petals, only make these a little smaller and thinner. Glue one into position just behind or on top of the ovary and gently press the sides down and around it, securing the bottom edge with glue. I trimmed the stems a little bit shorter and touched up the paint on the bottom as well. Allow it to dry, and that's it. Just repeat ad nauseum for however many you want to make, in my case lots, and you're done. So there you go. These are great fun to make and easy enough to scale up or down depending on what size you want them. They do take a while, but it's a nice relaxing craft to do with a podcast on in the background. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the tutorial useful. Thanks for watching!